to today's webinar on data governance in the age of generative AI, key insights from the Microsoft 365 Community Conference. I'm Ken Nuba, your host, and today we have an exciting session lined up, packed with valuable insights and updates that will help you navigate the evolving landscape of data governance and the latest SharePoint advanced management. As we delve into the latest advancements and best practices, you'll discover how to leverage SharePoint advanced management, implement effective policy controls, and automate the lifecycle of your content. Our goal is to equip you with the knowledge and tools to enhance your organization's data governance strategy, ensuring that compliance and maximizing the tools you already have or may own if you purchase M365 Copilot. With that said, I've got Scott Derby and Bill Beener here today. Scott is a principal cloud strategist here at Planet, and he's worked with Microsoft at Microsoft actually for over 15 years. He's actually my current director, and he currently supports the highly regulated customers in the GCC and GCC high environments today, and is a wealth of information on compliance and regulation. So happy to have him. And Bill is a consultant with our modern workplace collaboration team, who has been involved in almost all of our Copilot deployments, and they're reaching over 100 by now. I'm excited to hear from both of them today on their experience as it relates to governance and the use of the tools available to us for Copilot readiness and ongoing monitoring. Thanks for joining me today, guys.
Hey, Ken?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, buddy. Danny has his hand up. Go ahead, Danny.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Danny.
Oh, I'm sorry. I accidentally clicked that. My bad. Sorry.
No worries.
No biggie. Thanks for the heads up there, Bill.
No worries.
And paying attention there. Okay, so we have a full agenda, so let's go ahead and get started. First things first, I always love to do a quick poll here. So I would love to know if you have any experience with SharePoint Advanced Management or SAM. And the answers are: my tenant doesn't have it yet. Yes, just getting started. Yes, using it for a month or more, or don't know if I even own it yet. We'll get back to that in a few minutes here, but feel free to fill that out at any time. These answers are anonymous, so don't feel worried about that. All right, so let's get started. So just a quick review on what should be in your organization's governance and best practices today. Everything we're talking about here today hopefully should have been done by now in your tenant, especially now with Copilot. If you're thinking about bringing it on board. So you should be looking at controlling data access, oversharing. Are some of your documents, especially the sensitive ones, too accessible? Data protection and sensitivity. Do I already identify and protect my most sensitive content? And then finally, data lifecycle. Do you have stale data? Should some of that data silos simply not exist anymore in your environments? I know a lot of folks don't like to get rid of content, and keep it forever. So, I remember back in the day of Delve, right? When Delve was kicked on, I think everyone freaked out because all of a sudden you started seeing the first starts of, this kind of machine learning and some, proposing information to you saying, oh, by the way, you may have access to this, or you may have access to this because you're working with this person. Kind of freaked out a lot of people. So hopefully that was a good shot over the bow to get your stuff in order. But obviously now with Copilot, it's a little bit different and more in your face. So obviously it's a great topic for today. So data protection equates to information protection and sensitivity. Do I already identify and protect my most sensitive content? Data lifecycle equates to retention and is your content or sites no longer needed, out of date, or is anybody even paying attention to them, which is a big part of what we're going to talk about today, and how to take some automation. So let's talk about the tools now to help build and enforce your governance. So here we look at the controls to enforce your governance and what tools are available in your licenses that you own. So if you are an E3 user, look at the gray areas. If you're a E5 user, look at the light blue capabilities. And then now we start to stack on the darker blue ones, which are now part of SharePoint Advanced Management. So as you can see across data access, data protection, data lifecycle, lots of capabilities to start protecting your content. These are all best practices even before Copilot existed. And depending on the licenses that you have, you obviously have a bunch of different tools in your toolboxes to start working on trying to, get your governance in order to protect access, protect data protection and lifecycle. Scott or Bill, if you want to add anything to this, otherwise we'll go ahead and get started on talking about the new capabilities in SAM or SharePoint Advanced Management.
Nothing from me. I think you
Okay.
summarized it pretty well, Ken. So why don't we keep on going?
All right, let's do it. All right, so SharePoint Advanced Management, or SAM, I'll shorten that from here on out, is all about content governance throughout the Microsoft Copilot deployment and monitoring journey. Whether you're preparing for Copilot deployment or managing content post-implementation, it's going to be your go-to tool to help prevent content sprawl, streamline access management, and also analyze usage patterns through comprehensive reporting that'll be available that we're going to talk a lot about today. And remember, this is not just a one and done thing when you start working on Copilot readiness. It's something that you're going to have to be doing on a monthly basis. And we'll talk about some of the tools that actually regenerate reports on a monthly basis to keep you up to date on what's going on in your tenant. So one thing I want to just get clear before everyone goes any further here is that there's been a lot of discussion about, SharePoint Advanced Management and do I own it? Do I not own it? How do I get it? First of all, you can actually just go ahead and buy it if you want to buy it. But if you are a Copilot owner of licenses today, you actually have all the capabilities of SharePoint Advanced Management to you. In fact, when you see the Copilot licenses launch in your tenant, as deployed in your tenant, you'll start seeing a new Advanced Management tab show up. And that's where Advanced Management and SharePoint Advanced Management starts showing up to start taking advantage of it. So let's put that one to rest. This was mentioned last week at the Microsoft Community session, that the product manager stood up and said, let's put this one to rest. If you own Copilot, you own SharePoint Advanced Management. So all the capabilities I'm talking about today, with only one caveat that Microsoft is still discussing about some of the new AI capabilities that will be built into SharePoint Advanced Management. We won't see those probably till the Ignite timeframe, they're saying, according to the conference last week. But they are looking at actually integrating Copilot into SAM, so that you'll actually be able to ask questions to SAM and have it, give you back feedback and responses and recommendations on how to fix that. That's the only part that they're still unsure about the licensing, whether that's going to be included, because as you know, sometimes when they add Copilot to like Copilot for security, there's a premium charge for that AI capabilities. So with that, let's go ahead and get moving here.
I'll add one more bit of breaking information too
Sure,
for you, Ken. For those of you that are in GCC cloud, in the GCC environments, SharePoint Advanced Management actually has begun rolling out in that environment as well with your Copilot licenses as of this week. So, which is great news. I know a lot of people have been waiting for that, and we're starting to see it in customers' tenants already. So if it hasn't rolled out in your GCC tenant, for those of you that are in the GCC, it's coming soon.
That's awesome news, Scott. We've been hearing reports about that. I know Bill has too. He has been involved in many GCC tenants, and I think you started seeing it roll out too, Bill, right? Yeah.
Yeah, finally. It's been welcomed by a lot of folks who have been eagerly waiting for it. So.
All right. So to boil this down on how SAM can be useful, let's look at the 3 pillars of governance for SharePoint and OneDrive. That SAM will provide assistance with. Again, SAM is a tool built on, for accessing and then looking at SharePoint content, because SharePoint's the back end of everything, Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, right? So the 3 pillars of governance for SAM are built on reducing sprawl, and we're going to talk about each one of these, controlling oversharing, and managing lifecycle. I think this is a great slide that was shared at the conference last week. It kind of breaks down the 3 pillars and what's available actually in SharePoint Advanced Management, and what's available today versus what's available moving forward. Now, the items in red were just announced, so they are not available yet, but I will mention them briefly. I'll talk about the content management assessment on the next slide, so I'll hold off on that one. But if you want to know more about any of these items in red, check out the video link that I put in the end of this presentation when you get it, via email. And there's a great, about an hour-long video you can watch to actually see and hear some of what these capabilities are all about. We just don't have enough time to talk about all these things that are coming up in the future. So we'll talk about the things that you actually have access, which are the things not in red at this time. And at the bottom, notice on the top, you'll see content management assessment and AI insights. I'll talk about that one on the next slide. And at the bottom is the Copilot integration with SharePoint. I mentioned that earlier, that Copilot's going to be integrated, and you can see that it goes across all 3 of these pillars. So lots of information to come there, and we're super excited about some of these announcements and this new tooling that's going to be available. So I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, how to get started with Copilot, right? Well, this is this new content management assessment dashboard, which is not available yet, but I wanted to just let you guys hear about it. They're thinking it's going to be in the next couple months. We'll give you insight on your readiness. So, in the past, it required doing lots of scripting, possibly using parts of SAM to do this for you. But for those of you using SAM today, you currently see a long list of reports that are available to you. In the future, that default landing page for SAM will turn into this dashboard. And think of it as an easy button to get started, right? So this content management assessment is designed to help SharePoint admins to get started with SAM. It simplifies the process completely by understanding the current state of content management within your environment. And admins can start the assessment with a click of a button on the Advanced Management tab. And then the assessment runs various SAM reports like all together combined and categorizes the results for a very simple format to understand. The assessment then generates a list of sites with potential issues, recommends actions to fix them, and then administrators can create temporary policies for these sites and fix them as needed. The assessment can be run every 30 days, allowing admins to regularly monitor the address and address these issues. So this is like what I mentioned, it's not a one and done thing. Content's constantly changing, permissions are constantly changing. It's something that has to be done monthly. And so with that, we'll move on to the last of the updates here. So on today's program, we're going to talk about the items that are bolded, the items in yellow. We're going to show some really quick, Bill's going to do a quick demo on the items in yellow, and then the items in light blue are some of the new items that have not been released yet, but I just want to talk about them real quickly. And we don't have much time, so I'm going to go ahead and just tell you really quickly. The first one, the AI-driven site matching. This is one of those ones that may be outside the license, but users will be able to provide a list of correctly configured sites with similar content and similar access, and then leverage AI to actually scan through the target set of sites and say, I want you to make them just like these, right? So it's using AI to help you kind of template your configurations for these sites and help you understand and see how that's going to work out. So I'm super excited to see if that really works. It's probably going to be a lot more work than it sounds like, but we'll see if it actually works when it actually gets delivered. Restricted sites creation. SharePoint admins have the capability to configure groups with restricted site creation privileges and rights with specific groups within an organization. The policy can be applied granularly to team sites, communication sites, OneDrive for business, and so forth. And then agent insights. This is pretty exciting. This is available now on general availability. If you haven't heard yet, each SharePoint site now in your tenant has the ability to have an agent. Either a pre-built agent or a custom or a user-built agent on that selected content. So this report allows admins to identify sites with high usage of SharePoint agents and take appropriate actions to enhance the site security using features like restricted access control, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, as well as other capabilities. This is something you probably want to check out sooner than later. If you have not looked at it yet, definitely take a look at this new capability, this Agent Insights report, because you'll want to know what's going on in your environments with people creating agents that you may not even be aware of yet. All right. So let's talk about managing content sprawl. So in SAM, it's designed, it's to enhance site governance, right, by automating policies within SharePoint Admin Center and so forth. There's two main policies here, site ownership policies and inactive site policies. Bill's going to show us a demo of this in a minute. Site ownership policies help manage the ownership of SharePoint sites. They ensure that each site has responsible and accountable owners for their content. And as the organization grows, it becomes more challenging for SharePoint admins to keep track of site ownership and take necessary actions when new owners need to be identified. Let's say people retire, all of a sudden you got orphan sites. How do you deal with them? This is some of the automation that's going to be available for you here, and it is available for you here. And then inactive site policies detect inactive sites. Again, this is a concern because inactive sites could have wrong data, could have security issues with their data, and who do you contact for inactive sites, especially if there's no ownership of them, right? So I'll stop there, let Bill, if you have any comments about these items here, and then we can move on to the inactive site policies.
Yeah, I'm going to save it for the demos.
I figured,
Appreciate it,
okay, cool. Absolutely. To help with compliance and monitoring, you configure your organization's ownership policies to run every month. These policies identify sites that don't comply with the set ownership criteria and notify relevant users to facilitate the addition of new owners with minimal admin overhead. So this is huge. This is some of the automation that's going to be here. Again, we're going to save this for part of the demo here that we're going to show in a second. Unless you want to talk about the two main policy types, or do you want to talk about that during the demo, Bill?
During the demo, but really what we're looking at is, we want to keep the content that Copilot's indexing. We want it to be current, relevant, and access appropriate, right? And a lot of that starts with site ownership. So we want to, maintain some type of insight and process that identifies the site and says, hey, do we have one owner? Do we have two owners? And we're gonna talk a little bit about what that looks like in just a bit.
Awesome. And then site ownership policies allow you to configure your organization's ownership rules and run them monthly to identify sites that don't comply. These policies notify relevant users to facilitate the addition of new owners with minimum admin overhead. So now that this is another automated type of thing here. So I think we're going to save this again for the demo. So at this point, Bill, if you want to take over for the demo and talk about site ownership and inactive site policies, I think this would be a great time. Unless we have any questions, we're happy to stop for a second. We've been going here for a few minutes. Happy to answer any questions as well. All right, I'll go ahead and release my desktop, Bill, so you can take over. There you go.
All righty. So part of getting ready for Copilot, right? It's identifying, where our overshared content is and where our broad shared content is, right? And once that's identified, we still need to communicate some of that or collaborate with our site owners. So a good rule of thumb, and you may have this in place, and a lot of organizations have started to do it, is they want to require that every SharePoint site have two owners. And the reason being is that in the age of AI, especially, let's say one of the owners goes on maternity leave or paternity leave, and that site hasn't been active in, let's say the threshold is 3 months, and a notice goes out and there's only one owner. That's just going to keep going unanswered because that individual is not there. And what'll happen is if you have an automated process, that'll kick off and it could archive that site on the person, and they'll come back and it'd be gone. So having two owners is important. And ensures that if an inactive site policy is triggered, that someone does respond. God forbid if both of the owners are out, there are measures you can take as well by contacting, say, a member of the site to select a new owner. But the key here is we want to have an owner because we need somebody to work with in case later on with SAM we identify possible oversharing or possible broad sharing. Now, a good rule of thumb on those two, oversharing, just, short and sweet, is unintentional access to individuals. And broad sharing is more, it's strategic, but it's still kind of broad, right? So as these reports are automated and they run and we get, inactive sites that get picked up and we get overshared content alerts, what we want to do is we want to have folks that we can work with to remediate. So what's great about these is that you can actually run them in simulation, so it won't trigger any type of remediation in terms of if rule of thumb, I think out of the box, it's you get 3 notifications to a site owner or site owners, and if there's no response, you can either choose to do nothing or you can put that site in read only. I recommend the latter only because, for example, if you got a site that's 6 months old, we'll say, and 3 notices went out and nobody answered, it's probably a good rule of thumb that that's time to archive that site. The site ownership policies. So this is where we would specify, how many owners. You can even have 3 if you'd like. I definitely recommend more than 1, especially for folks who maybe rotating out or, like I said, on vacation or leave. This feature is currently, there's a bug in it, and Microsoft's working to resolve it. So this should be back as a function very soon. I would keep an eye on the message center, just in case it sooner than I'm saying. Next, I'm going to talk about.
Before you get there, right? One thing
Oh
I
yeah,
saw, and just like most security things you put in place, you can put it in monitoring mode, right? So there's no
Yeah.
harm in testing this out and trying it out and seeing what the results are, right? So I think that's a great thing to look at too.
Yeah, the simulation mode, like it works similar to it does with sensitivity labels, right? We get to see what the results will look like and fine tune the parameters and just keep getting it to the point where we like the results. And then we can activate that policy and have it run live.
Excellent.
All right, next I want to talk about site level access restriction. So in a little bit, we're gonna talk about some additional features, and I want to ensure that there's some caveats and there's some little gotchas that we got to keep in mind when we're working with some of these tools. So, for example, site level access restriction, by description, it's restricting access to a SharePoint site based on a set of Entra security groups or Microsoft 365 groups or M groups. Now, the caveat here is that the way this is supposed to work by design, if you're not a member of one of these groups that's added to the site, you shouldn't be able to access it, let alone view any content from it. The loophole is that if somebody already has access, it circumvents this feature. So what we've been recommending is this is a great feature for any type of SharePoint site that has sensitive data. For example, HR sites. And a good rule of thumb is to whoever's managing, the data hygiene and data hardening on a site, right? Let's say it's HR payroll. The first thing we'd want to do is we'd want to add an administrator to that site, and then we'd want to just take away everything else, all the other permissions that are on that site. Turn on site level access restriction, and then add our groups. And that mitigates the whole loophole where SharePoint groups and existing folks still have access. And I know that's hard to visualize, as I communicate that. I just want to make sure, does anybody have any questions on the feature, the function, and rule of thumb on how to implement it?
One thing I think I'll add in, Bill, Microsoft has been very clear and definitely highly recommending that sensitivity labels are part of any of your governance policy for Copilot.
Definitely.
This is, and while that doesn't necessarily diminish, this is a great first step for organizations because we all know sensitivity labels are a bit complex to be able to implement and often take a lot of overhead from end users and the business to be able to understand what the policies that need to go into it. This is a great way to kind of help mitigate that first step and get quicker into being able to realize value from Copilot. So I think this is a great first addition here that we can use to really kind of jumpstart things for organizations.
Okay. And that's really the very first step when we're getting ready for Copilot, right? A challenging question for any organization to answer is, where is all of our sensitive data? And then the next question that follows is, okay, who has access to that sensitive data? And finally, is that access appropriate? Right. So we can answer the last two. We can simply pull off the permissions to the site and turn on site level access restriction. And then we can apply the permissions that need to be there or are appropriate, and not having to worry about somebody being grandfathered in if they laterally transferred, for example. So it is a super great tool. Okay, Ken, I think that does it for me.
All right, we're heading back here. So we'll talk about, thanks for that, Bill, by the way. We're going to talk a little bit about, we got some slides on what he just talked about as well. So if it was hard for you to visualize, we'll talk about it again. So don't worry about that. Let's talk about content lifecycle management. Involves overseeing the creation of retention and disposal of digital content, right? So this ensures that the information is accessible, secure, and compliant with your organization's policies and regulations. And it can also help Copilot find the most accurate and up-to-date information. So SAM helps provide features to streamline the content lifecycle management. For example, it includes site lifecycle management policies like site ownership policies, like we just talked about. And those are automated capabilities to help make sure that there's somebody always in charge of that site, right? Other items in this category are change history on sites. There's reports that can kind of see that. So if all of a sudden there's something that doesn't look right from a permission standpoint, you can see the change history on that site. Setting up access reviews, which I think is really awesome, so that you can set up automated access reviews to make sure that people who are owning these sites are actually looking at them every 6 months, 3 months, whatever it may be. And this can be automated, especially if you have an E5 license. And then finally, a new one that I really love, which is not available yet, but it's coming, is the site attestation policy. This policy assigns responsibility for site reviews to site owners, helping prevent sites from becoming inactive or ownless. So it requires owners and admins to regularly verify key details like site purpose, ownership, membership, permissions, and sharing settings at configurable intervals. So if no action is taken within 3 months of a review notification, automated enforcement measures like site archival or setting the site to read only may be applied, which I think is pretty interesting. This policy also supports excluding specific users from notifications. So if you have somebody high up like that shouldn't have to do this every so often, although I think it's best practice to do that, you can actually put exclusions in to exclude them from having to be part of this attestation policy. It's not an all or nothing type of deal here. You can put exceptions in. So now let's talk about managing permissions. We kind of talked a little bit about this a second ago, but obviously, it's very huge. One of the new items here is delegated restricted content discovery, which I love this one also. It allows admins to delegate the decision of whether content should be part of Copilot processing to the actual content owners. So think of this as a distributed way of doing restricted content. It gives the power to the people to that own the sites, if you allow this, right, to actually monitor who has access. And this is a new capability that's rolling out soon. The restricted access control allows you to restrict access to SharePoint sites and their content only to members of the connected M365 group. This means that even if someone previously had access, they won't be able to access that site unless they are part of this group. Think of this as like a kill switch. When I first heard of this, I was like, this is incredible, because if somebody if you went to a site that all of a sudden the inheritance was broken, it just got totally whacked, right? Like people just went over time. The SharePoint site is just, the permissions have gotten crazy, right? You can use this capability now and reset it and then get control back of that site. So I think that's a very powerful thing coming up here. Next, data access governance reports. They help you discover sites that contain potentially overshared and sensitive content. So you can use these reports to assess and apply appropriate security and compliance policies. Then there's the conditional access policies. This enforces like stringent access conditions. When users access these sites, you can apply authentication or use sensitivity labels to connect Azure AD conditional access policies to actually labeled sites. We'll talk a little bit about this in the next few slides. Bill, anything else you want to add here? Went through a lot there.
So there's actually a question in our Q&A.
Cool.
The question is, with all the different front doors that group creation can occur with these policies, if someone takes ownership of a SharePoint group site, does that make them the owner of the group? Actually, it does not. It's just that SharePoint site. It doesn't automatically make you owner of the group or any of the other resources that are created when you have a group, like Planner or the shared mailbox, along those lines. And that's an important distinction when it comes to governance and access control. So just at a high level, if we want someone to have full access to all group resources, they must be added as the owner of the group, not just the SharePoint site.
Excellent. Thanks for the question, by the way. And hopefully we answered it. Please put some questions in the chat window if you've got them. You don't even have to use the Q&A. You can just put them right in the chat window. If you have more, we have a question period at the end here we can get back to as well. All right, moving on. I love this next one. blocking download policy for SharePoint Advanced Management. This is a really cool capability. This is particularly useful for protecting sensitive information, ensuring that users can only access content through their browser without the ability to download, print, or sync the files to their desktops. So if you have highly sensitive data that you really don't want to lose access and control to, this is definitely something you want to look at. When you set up the block download policy, users will have a browser-only access to those files. They won't be able to download, print, or sync the files, and they won't be able to access the content through apps, including Microsoft Office 365 desktop apps. So it's only, this is how it works. It ensures that sensitive information remains secure by restricting how users can interact with those files. Huge thing for compliance and data protection. So if you're controlling your data, this might be something that you want to take a look at there.
And I would like to add to this one. This actually introduces, can you go back 1 sec, Ken?
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
no worries. So an interesting use case. A lot of state and local governments, they've got a lot of legal folks and compliance folks who are like, hey, listen, we want temporary transcription, and we don't want anybody, to be able to download a recording. They want to be able to record internally, but they don't want it to be downloadable. And the reason behind that,
use case. Yeah.
And like an important reason behind that is if I get a recording and I have a Copilot license, even though I'm not in that tenant, if I download it and I put it into my OneDrive is going to begin to automatically generate a transcript and meeting notes for me through Stream, right, in my tenant. So the organization has lost positive control, and technically a lot of those meetings are considered official records, right? And now you've got somebody generating their own records of it. And we know with transcription, it's not always 100%. And so you could have erroneous information getting out to the public, for example, by having a team meeting erroneously downloaded by unauthorized folks. I just wanted to put that in there. That was a great.
That's a great use case. And thanks for bringing that up, Bill. Awesome. All right, moving right along here. Data access governance. In order, a lot of people think in order to, and I think Scott, you were just talking about this, in order to get the Copilot deployed, you got to have, sensitivity labels in place. The good news is there's lots of different tools for us to use here in the SharePoint Advanced Management. And so it's not just, so that's what I'm just trying to get over here, is that you don't just have to, sensitive information labels are great, but they do take a long time to roll out, especially from an organizational change management standpoint. People need to work differently. The data access governance reports in SharePoint are designed to help organizations manage and secure their data by identifying sites that contain potentially overshared or sensitive content. So these reports are part of SAM and are essential for maintaining data security and compliance. But we're going to talk about even more tools here in the next few slides here about how to focus Copilot to find what it's looking for or not find what it's looking for. So this whole section is going to be on data governance that we're talking about next. Scott or Bill, anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, a lot of preparatory work here. There's a lot of documentation out there that says you got to do all these things, to make sure that Copilot is surfacing the best data and the right data. And the important rule to keep in mind is that as we review all these different functions or features or tools rather, Copilot is not going to magically give access to something you didn't already have access to, right? It's just going to be easier for you to surface it. So when we're looking at these, we want to look within the context of if I have a Copilot license, anything, for example, shared with everyone except external users, which also equates to a team with a public setting, is going to be surfaced by Copilot. So we want to keep that oversharing and broad sharing in mind when we start to look at these reports.
Wow, you just teed that one up perfectly, Bill. So let's talk about this one, right? Go ahead if you want to. So
this is a great report, right? Everybody's got, this is great for a daily or a monthly battle rhythm, right? So what's important to remember about this report here is that if you generate it from within SAM, it's a running report of the last 28 days. Okay, so it shows you, the top 100 sites over the last 28 days that have the most new everyone except external users sharing. applied. Now, why that's important is because that's great for the last 28 days, but tomorrow that 28th day becomes 29 and it rolls off, right? So we lose visibility into it. So a good rule of thumb is when we're getting ready for Copilot, there's some great scripts that will go back to day one of your tenant, inventory everywhere that this claim is used, okay? And provide you with the opportunity to look through these sites and say, okay, this is appropriate, this is appropriate. All right, wide networking diagrams is available to everyone except external users? Probably not. Let's remediate that accordingly. Now, Microsoft's best practices, they want, they recommend this be turned off, this claim be turned off at the tenant level, in addition to the everyone claim. If you've been in your tenant for a few years, it's really a difficult, that's a big lift, right? So the alternative is to generate that inventory, validate the sites that should have it, remediate the ones that don't, and then remain vigilant over what's currently out there. And then after that exercise is completed, we can start to leverage or transition into this 28-day rolling report.
Good information. Yeah, unfortunately, people like to choose this one if it's available. So definitely got to be careful. Definitely keep an eye on this one. Look for use the reports that give you access to show you the results of people using these claims, and take special note of them on an ongoing basis, not just a one-time deal.
And a useful tip is any public team, any Microsoft team that has a public setting or public visibility, that's automatically going to have everyone except external users associated. And if you just simply take, and that's another exercise that we recommend running through, look at all your public teams, say, in fact, they should be public. If not, make them private. And you get two birds with one stone there. You've limited your broad sharing, and you've also automatically removed the everyone except external users claim from that SharePoint site simply by going from public to private.
Yeah, you would think, that there shouldn't be very many public sites in a tenant typically. I mean, there's probably there's use cases for them, but there's not that many use cases that you should have more than a handful,
Generally, like an intranet, you know, you want it. But yeah.
So definitely a low-hanging thing to take care of initially, right off the bat. Awesome. Let's move on. So the permission state report provides admins a view of all site permissions across SharePoint, OneDrive, and files. This helps identify potentially over-permissioned content across the tenant. It gives you a bird's eye view of who has access to what. This is crucial for discovering any content that might be over-permissioned. So Bill, if someone's getting ready to be offboarded, would this be a good report to generate on their behalf to see what they had access to, and who's going to take ownership of it, or what?
I think it's good for a quick snapshot. I do. And then I think if you want to go any deeper, the DAG PSR or the PSR, which is called, it does provide that great bird's eye view, but there are scripts that'll generate, more detailed.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree with you on that.
So this is definitely a bird's eye view of everything, pretty much. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But as with all of these, there's a cap, right? There's
sure.
It's either 100 sites, or it's 28 days or 48 hours. So it's important to just keep those in mind, that what you see may not be entirely what's out there.
All right, here's the big one: restricted SharePoint search. Lots of people are talking about this one, especially as they get started. Bill, let's give me your spiel. Like, what do you think about this one, and what does it do? Tell me about it.
So this is one of those other features that also has some caveats and some loopholes, right? If you read all the documentation that's out there and you're like, oh, okay, I got to get all my labeling in line, I got to auto labeling, I got to get data class. If I got to do all these things before I can even use Copilot, realistically, when am I going to use Copilot, right? It's going to be like years, but that's not the case, right? Restricted SharePoint search and other tools like this are there to allow you to put the organizational data off to the left, so to speak, right? Have your Copilot licensed users focus on their OneDrive data, focus on other things they have access to be indexed, and then just take a breath and begin to slowly vet who's got access to the organization's data. Now, restricted SharePoint search is designed as a temporary solution. It's designed to kind of like a ginormous hammer to kind of just provide, a temporary roadblock while a longer term solution is put into place. For example, remote content discovery,
We'll talk about that in a
labeling,
second. Yeah.
something longer term. Now, the way restricted SharePoint search works is it generates a curated allow list. And this curated allow list is technically, it's a list of sites that the organization has said, hey, this content's current, it's access appropriate, we authorize it to be consumed by Copilot, let's add it to this list.
It's the safe place, yeah.
Yeah,
Or
so
safe
this,
places.
yeah, right. This is a PowerShell level administrative function. When you get it, like I said, it holds up to 100 sites. When you get to that 100th site, you can actually go back to the first site and just start replacing them with hub sites. And any sites associated with a hub do not count against that 100. So theoretically, you can increase that value significantly. Now, there's not a financial cost to leverage this. This becomes available as soon as you assign that first Copilot license. There is a technical cost, however. And some of those important caveats are when you turn this on and you start to populate that curated allow list, that also is going to restrict the SharePoint organizational search to that curated allow list as well.
Yeah,
now, this is temporary, right? So once we get our longer term solution in place, we can pull it off and everything goes back to normal. The same caveats apply here that applied on restricted content discovery. For example, if somebody already has access to a file, even if the site itself that file resides on isn't on the safe list, they can still get to it, right? So again, there's a little bit of extra work that should be done. The other caveat is, if a file appears or recent sites, recent files, if they're been accessed recently and even if they're not on that allow list, they could still get to it. So important to keep that in mind. And again, this is temporary. It's designed to be turned off as soon as your longer term solution is in place.
Yeah, and there's other tools in the toolbox we're going to talk about here in a second. So let's move on. We're running out of time here. But please put your questions in the window if you have them. So sharing links reports let you identify potential sources of oversharing by showing the sites where users created sharing links. So, this is pretty much as is anywhere. So the report gives you these different capabilities, the anyone links, the people in your organization links, and specific people links. So not sure if there's much to talk about here unless you have something else, Bill.
Yeah. So this is also a running 28-day report. This does not go back any further, and it also is not going to list anything older that has, for example, if you send an invite out and it was never accepted or executed, and it's just hanging out there, anything older than 28 days won't appear in here either. So important to also run something that gets a little bit of a deeper dive.
Got it. And this is what you kind of showed us before in the demo, the restricted access control, which is a feature that allows you to limit access to SharePoint sites and their content to specific groups of users. This is done using the M365 groups or Microsoft Entra, security groups. Again, this is definitely a good tool to use and definitely a helpful tool to restrict it by groups capabilities, right?
Yeah, in a lot of the engagements, we talk about how, as an organization, I'm guilty of it too, right? For the last 20 years, and not to date myself, but for the last 20 years, we've been kicking that can, right? We're like MOS 2007, we're going to upgrade, we can redo our security matrix, and we'll do it after the upgrade, right? It never gets done. You keep kicking the can, and finally, somebody took the can away, right? Copilot took it away. So this is a great opportunity to reset permissions on our sensitive sites. Actually, like I said, add a SharePoint admin account to it, take everything else out of there and start from scratch after you turn on our restricted access control. It's going to protect your sites, and it's also going to mitigate those loopholes for folks who are already in those SharePoint groups.
Awesome. All right. Let's talk about restricted content discoverability. This sounds a lot like SharePoint search, but I know it's different, right? Unlike restricted SharePoint search, which limits access to content, restricted discoverability actually masks or hides the existence of the content itself, which is super safe, right? So you don't even know that the HR site's there if you use restricted content discoverability, right, Bill?
Yeah, how this works is it won't appear in search results, right? It's also, in my opinion, a temporary stopgap as well. It allows you to hide content is overshared or broad shared. and it allows you to keep it from appearing in search results. But it doesn't stop folks from getting to the data if they know where that data is. It just prevents the ability to discover it, much like a Microsoft team that has a private setting, but discoverable, right? So similar along those lines.
Very good. And we're here for questions. We can certainly go back to any of these that you want to talk about. So like if you wanted to exclude, so what we just were talking about, the discoverability, like if you wanted to exclude some sites from being on the search index so Copilot can't find it, this is what you'd use, right?
I would use this until a more broad, longer-term solution was in place. For example, implementing labeling, right, or leveraging RAC, the restricted access control. It really depends on the content, where it is, and who we need to keep out of it. I think there isn't really a one tool fits all scenario.
Yeah, that's definitely becoming apparent. There's lots of tools and lots of capabilities, and some of them seem like they're overlapping, but they all really have unique, specific capabilities here.
Yeah, and the thing to remember here, right? Like we've all heard the nightmares, right? We've heard about the guy who was disgruntled and was like, how much asked any AI, hey, how much money should I be making? And not only did it tell him, but it also told him how much everybody else in the company was making, right? What they don't say is they don't put that into context, right? That person already had access to that information. He just didn't realize it, right? So, a lot of this is put into place in different tools for different functions. And it's just important to remember, when you get a Copilot license assigned to you or for our administrators, an important thing to keep in mind is as soon as that license is assigned, the semantic indexing process for that user begins, and it goes out, and anywhere that user has view permissions to, and that's the thing to keep in mind with all of these. View permissions to is going to be indexed. So that's every public team, right? So we want to make sure that content is supposed to be public. And again, it's Copilot has a tendency to surface this content, overshared content, as part of content generation. Whereas if you were to, it's less of a chance of somebody, Bob on a Friday trying to kill an hour is like, let me look around SharePoint. Oh, wow, I didn't know I had access. Like that situation is fewer and far between than Copilot generating content. So
exactly. Still looking for questions, folks. We had one question come in early, and I think we kind of addressed it, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway for Scott and Bill if they want to answer it. Or, how do we set up governance that enables people to make, use, and enjoy SharePoint and Copilot M365 agents?
Oh, agents.
Boy. So interesting. Just like Copilot, you're going to have some governance around agents as well. And first of all, you need to understand is what's going on in your tenant, right? So by default, agents are turned on. So if you want a proactive stance, you probably want to think about how you want to roll out agents versus everyone in the world just starting to create agents on their own, right? So that's the first thing in governance is decide how you want to handle agents, because there's going to be a day where there's a cost for them, right? So that's another thing that you need to think about. Bill or Scott, any thoughts about how to make governance on SharePoint and Copilot agents?
So I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bill, and I can jump in after you. No.
I'm on the technical, I'm on the back end, right? Nobody really I don't even think Ken knows what it looks like, to be honest. But anyway, on the back end as an administrator and an engineer, I need to know who's got agents out there and what those agents are doing. And I need some kind of metrics. I need to know if some of them have gone rogue, and rogue defined as in, performing functions either intentional or otherwise. And if there's anything long running, right? Because sometimes agents can generate a cost. If you run out of, message packs or whatever the case may be for an agent, you want to have some kind of visibility, and that's important. And that visibility is there. So it's important for admins to know where it is and what to do if something goes rogue, and to take action.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the kickoff of this conversation today, it's general availability. The agents reports are there, so you can actually see what agents are being used. You can see how many people are using them. You can see the top 100 agents and see who's generating the most hits and things like that. So definitely take a look at that report from SharePoint Advanced Management. Again, you need to have SharePoint Advanced Management or a Copilot license in your tenant to be able to get access to those reports.
And I think one thing I'll add in from governance from an agent's perspective would be I'll chime in for more of the user experience and the business experience. Number one, really make sure you understand what the use case scenarios that you're going to be looking at for those agents are. Not every use case is great for an agent. Make sure you're looking at it from where am I clearly outlining and streamlining processes and, making a process more efficient. Understand and know where the data the agent's pulling from. And as you first start exploring that, tighten that group. So for example, if you're going to be using agents within M365, limit it to specific SharePoints and sites where you know what that data is and you can clearly set a good catalog of prompts that people can start with and then slowly grow it from there. So in essence, you want to crawl before you walk, before you run.
Excellent points there. And a lot of the same data governance, especially the source data, like make sure that it's super protected. You got to have a data governance structure in place to begin with before agents start coming into this as well. We do have a question here. It says, is there a capability to remove unique permissions of multiple files even after the removing of the unique permissions from a document library, Bill?
Wow. So yeah, if you're doing it in bulk, PowerShell is definitely the way to go. But if you're targeting all the files in a particular document library, probably want to resolve how that happened first. I would imagine inheritance was broken and somebody got, super secret squirrely with the permissions. But if you reset at the parent level, that should push down to those child objects being folder and files. And in worst case, for larger jobs, I would definitely go to PowerShell and do it that way. Manually is definitely not the way to go. Programmatic through PowerShell is probably the best route.
Yeah. So, right. Tim, feel free to come off of mute if you want to bring in the OCM angle on this agent conversation. I know you played a lot with them. If not, we can move on and finish up here. You have the ability to unmute, I believe.
Oh, you know what? I actually have to correct myself on it. That's actually a really good PowerShell is the answer, James. There are some files that, yes, you're correct. They actually will not, if you reinstate her inheritance, will not take, those unique permissions off. So PowerShell is going to be the best way to go for that.
All right.
That was actually my agent was actually telling me that. No, I'm sorry, you're wrong, Bill. Go ahead.
Very good, very good. All right, as I mentioned, in preparing this presentation this month, we've collected lots of great resources here. Definitely take a look at the if you want to see the presentation that was done by the product manager for SharePoint Advanced Management, a lot of things we talked about today, take a look at that second, or actually the third link there, what's new in content governance in SharePoint, OneDrive at Microsoft Community Hub. Lots of great links here. Definitely take a look. I think the video is actually, it's the second video here is what's new and coming in SAM in 2025. Take a look at that one. But all these are great if you're just getting started with SAM. Again, the way to get access to SAM is you can either buy it directly or you could just buy some Copilot licenses and it's turned on for your entire tenant to be able to start using and use it. So will an AI agent be able to do that in the future is the question.
I was just about to answer that because I mean, Tim, that's something that can be done today, is it not? I don't know about autonomously, but that's a great question, James. Definitely in the future, I'm gonna look at being able to do that today.
Right. So let's wrap things up. Just a reminder about all the benefits in the YouAlreadyOwnIt program. This program we do once a month on the fourth Thursday of every month. As part of this program, we do this live webinar. We record all of them. We've got 5 years worth of recordings on various topics. If those links should be in the newsletter to watch those videos, read those blogs that we've done in the past. We also have, lots of workshops, about 22 different workshops available for you all. So if you're interested in any of those, please reach out to Kim Snyder and take a look at those workshops. Please have someone else talking. So these workshops are available free of charge as part of the YouAlreadyOwnIt program. There are no sales, no cost, so please reach out to Kim Snyder on that and she'll get you hooked up on getting access to any of these workshops. Feel free to share them around your organization. We're happy to do them. Next webinar is going to be on June 26th at 1 o'clock. Save the date. We'd love for you to join us again. And, obviously we'd love to know how we did today. Was this useful information? Did you get something out of it? 1, not useful. 5, obviously very useful. And that's pretty much a wrap. We've covered a lot of ground today, from understanding the importance of data governance and AI to exploring best practices for managing data in M365. We've also delved into powerful features of SAM and discussed strategies for automating site lifecycle management, like the site ownership things, and managing content sprawl. As we move forward, I encourage you all to leverage the insights and tools of the items we discussed today for your organization's data governance strategy. Remember, effective data governance is key to maximizing the benefits of AI technologies while ensuring compliance and security. As always, don't hesitate to reach out to us at YouAlreadyOwnIt at go-planet.com. For any questions or further assistance, we're here to help you on this journey. Thanks for joining us today, and a big thanks to Scott and Bill for joining us. That's a wrap. We'll see you next month.
Bye, everyone.